A successful, enterprising man was dating a beautiful girl. He loved her and was over the moon about it. I am on friendly terms with this guy. He is a true prodigy. Tremendous physical strength, impressive proportions, creativity, and an analytical mindset. An athlete. He lifts me, a 220-pounder, with one hand. I don't know how to describe his relationship with his girlfriend. It's a fairy tale that didn't have a suitable description. Probably any girl dreams of a male prince, to be carried in her arms and gifted every day, to arrange romantic evenings at the seaside, and to present expensive gifts. She had all that. But there were no lasting reciprocal feelings for him, only emotional attachment. There is always a breakup in life, and she chose his brother over him because she loved him with all her heart. Mutually. I will not describe in detail the attempts the jilted prince made to bring back his beloved. They are nothing compared to what he did last summer, just 2 weeks after the breakup. On a hot summer day, he caught the beauty while swimming at a body of water in a secluded spot. And then everything was like in the movie Prisoner of the Caucasus. He grabbed her in his mother's clothes, twisted her up, and put her in the car. She was taken prisoner in the country house where he brought her. But I learned about this much later than I met him. A chance encounter resolved this situation dramatically, not in his favor. The guy was desperately trying to prove his love to the girl, so much so that he left her alone for 4 hours. He had scratches on his hands from her nails and bruises on his face. It took me a long time to convince him to let the girl go. At that point, he had already bought a ring and gifts, with the firm conviction to gift his captive. Finally, the guy turned on his head, realized everything, and together we went to free her. We opened the house, and I was numb at first. The girl was bound like a character in a Gaidai movie, with her mouth taped over, completely naked and strapped to the bed. It was an oil painting. It took half an hour to untie her. The knots were soaked with water, and a friend asked her forgiveness for a full 2 hours. A month later, she and her brother made up, and everything fell into place. And as compensation, the girl went to the Maldives at his expense. Such a strange life story. My husband and I have been living together for more than 20 years. All these years I tried to be a good wife, gave him 3 children, was a good mother, worked equally with my husband, tried to share the financial expenses of the family with him. Perhaps my upbringing had put a big imprint on my mind, but for me family came first. It was above me, my needs, my love for myself. I melted into my husband, my children, my family. All these years my husband cheated on me. At first, when I was young, I didn't care much about his cheating. In his phone I found pictures with other girls, in his pocket valentines, condoms, and a bunch of hotel rooms. Although our finances were poor, he allowed himself to go on vacation with another woman, which I could tell from the photos he had taken together with his mistress. I got fed up with it all. I started fighting with him. We had terrible conflicts. I tried to get a divorce, but I had nowhere to go. The children were very young. In 2018, my husband and I and his colleagues traveled to another country, where with the delegation we were in, there was a rather unassuming woman who my husband praised all the way. At the border, he took her luggage off her hands, threw his luggage on me, and went ahead with her. When we arrived at our destination, we looked for a hotel, but the hotel where most of our delegation was staying did not have a double room for my husband and me. There was a room for 3, and they decided to put me and my husband in it. Then that woman began to ask to stay in that room with us, my husband and I, of course, resented it, saying that we would go to another hotel. Then the hotel staff moved the 2 girls to that room and put the woman who tried to move in with us in one room. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I tried to find an explanation for her behavior, tiredness on the road, acclimatization, and her stupidity. but emotions were running high. In the evening of that day, a married couple invited us to see the city, and my husband, and I did not guess anything, went to see the city. Upon arrival, we found out that the woman had made a scene because we, my husband and I, had not invited her along. To say I was shocked by her behavior is nothing to say. The next day, my husband and I decided to go to the stores and markets of the city. But that woman followed us relentlessly, and even running we could not get rid of her. She followed us everywhere. I did not want to cause a scandal in front of this fool, especially in a foreign country. I noticed that my husband was always trying to take care of her. He would move her salad and pour tea or coffee, worrying if she had not eaten or not come for lunch. When we went back home, she wanted to sit next to us, but due to the lack of space, she went far back. When we arrived in her country, she got off at the first stop in town without even saying goodbye to anyone. At home, I began to demand an explanation from my husband for all that I had witnessed on the trip. He swore that he had nothing going on with this woman, that she was so inadequate in her own right, etc., etc., but I began to analyze. Because for that whole year my husband and I had no intimacy in bed at all, he kept avoiding me, citing fatigue and business. He left the house very early, had to be late at night. On my inquiries, was ready to throw himself on me with his fists. I put up with all of this for the sake of my family and my children. Finally, I realized that they were just wiping their feet on me. So I took all 3 children and left the house for my mother. Mentally, I was ready for a divorce and was about to file for divorce as my husband began to beg that no more women in adultery, that we cannot divorce, saying that would be a strong psychological trauma for the children. Anyway, I persuaded him to get back together. We got back together. We lived in relative peace for 2 years, then he started disappearing again. On the messenger I left on his computer, I found his correspondence with his new mistress, with whom they had, according to their texts, great love and crazy sex. Again the scandals, again the lies, again the conflicts that exhausted me more than they exhausted him. I calmed down, he was back in the family again, and I finally lost faith and trust in him. Something inside me broke with a loud crunch. I live with him by inertia. I don't love him. I don't hate him. I just live. I don't want to marry another man. I don't want to live alone either. He is comfortable with me. I am also comfortable. But sometimes all my resentments and emotions from his cheating come back to me, and I start to hate the whole world, cry for a long time, and go away into myself. 17 years ago, I broke up with a young man. There was no love then, but we were very good together. There was a youthful maximalism that did not allow us to build a normal relationship. Each of us decided that we did not need the other, and I broke off communication, without quarrels and disagreements, just silently. Recently found each other on social media, but we each have families. My head was spinning. It seemed like the best feeling in the world. It seemed as if there were no 17 years, began to communicate for 24 hours a day. This went on for a year and a half. We lived a long way from each other. We met only once. 3 days of happiness, absolute, as it seemed to me. Intimate relations were not planned on my part, but before a few hours had passed, I realized that I was ready to give much for this minute happiness. I resisted myself for a long time, and him too, but I gave in. And later I began to torment my conscience, because my relationship with my husband is almost perfect. I do not know if it is love or what, but the fact that such families are few, this is a fact. It is true that at that time there was some kind of cooling on his part, a change of job or an age crisis. I thought that for 15 years he might be fed up with me. We are living people. I began to be torn between 2 men, not physically but morally. It affected the relationship with this man for the worse. On the contrary, With my husband, the relationship became even better because I felt constant guilt before him and tenderness towards my husband covered my head. Apparently, this began to strain the man. Communication was practically reduced to nothing. He was solving his family problems, and I didn't get in the way. Even I thought that he did not need, although he claims otherwise. As soon as I go into complete ignorance, Ken immediately write when I asked why there is no communication as before, with all the passions, says that he does not want to hang his problems on me, and they really are now. He has not lived with his wife for a few months now, and he is very upset about the separation from his son. They didn't have children for a long time, but when they had their long-awaited child born to a surrogate mother, it was like they didn't need each other. I do not know how I should behave with him. I just offered him friendship. He says, I cannot be friends with you. So it turns out that he does not hold and does not let go. I do not want anything with him, but I am not ready to lose him either. I cannot understand it. My resentment comes from the fact that I thought for years that I was mistaken in a man, fell in love, met him, and now I realize what a clever girl I was at 19 years old, and that I was not mistaken. Except that I cheated on my husband, and I can't forgive myself for that. If he could share all these experiences with me, it would be much easier for me. Besides, he has a phenomenal gift of persuasion. But as it turns out, we made a mess together, and now I'm left alone with my problems. No, he will talk if I ask, but it's a must, and I want the man to really care about my mental state, though I know that for men it is not typical. But it is so hard to readjust when just recently I heard from him that he does not need anyone but me. I went to a psychologist. At first they sort of turned everything inside out. It even got a little easier, but I was constantly forced to accept that I was his mistress, and I can't take it as a given. I don't want to put up with the idea that a man could talk about having a child together, me moving to where he lives, him coming to see me 1,500 km away, and all this just for sex. I loved him. I wasn't meeting him for sex. For me, love and sex are very closely related. Of course, within the limits of my age with him, maybe in 30 years I will quite accept platonic love as well. I still can't get over the resentment and guilt. It has been 8 months and no progress, except that I gnaw myself all the time. And my husband is beside me, content, happy as ever. I smile and laugh at him, and at night, hugging him with tears in my eyes, I whisper only one thing: forgive me if you can, even though he can't hear it. If I could, I would tell him everything, but I can't hurt a man like that, and it won't solve the problem. I'll just shift the burden of responsibility on his shoulders. You have to pay for everything in life, but the price for love was very high.